It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back from Common Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Updates. This is where I update my main and test decks for you on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing it, and that's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're getting to the last of the main decks, and then we'll continue through some of the main decks I've been testing. But today, we're talking about Naya Dinos with Pantlaza, Sun Favored. A 5-mana Naya 4/4 Dino that says whenever Pantlaza or another dinosaur we control enters the battlefield, we can discover X, where X is that creature's toughness, and this only happens once each turn. Remember that on Pantlaza's release, Dinos really were split between either Gishath or Atlaplani, right? And I think Pants adds a really interesting space for Dinos because I think it really pays off some of the things that Green does really well, which is cheating dinosaurs in. We have a new dinosaur that helps cheat dinosaurs in. And then, we're in such a great color combination for haste enablers. There's 2 dinosaurs that do that we'll talk about. There's also support pieces we've added. Because if we're going to cheat the dinosaurs in, whether it be off of the Discover, off of Pantlaza, or on other things, you want to turn them, right, and immediately start attacking. I think this deck excels by, hitting your mana curve to Pantlaza and exploding it immediately into bigger and bigger dinosaurs to try to overwhelm your opponents. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is with haste enablers. Now, the key thing to remember about Pantlaza, and I'll be honest, I think the thing that a lot of people discount is that a lot of people want to just discover into another dinosaur, which isn't a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. Getting another dinosaur out is great, but I'd almost argue early game, you really want to discover into sport pieces. You really want to discover into haste enablers or draw outlets or, things like that, because it's just going to allow you to dig deeper, get more value, and set up your board better, right, as you push into, the turns where you're going to be getting into combat. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking that out down below. Well, all right. The fun part is that the list of the dinosaurs does change, right? Depending on kind of the value you see in them. I think what was interesting to me was the crop of Aether Drift dinosaurs that we got, and how it kind of changed up some of the value. Aganosaur Rex being an 8 toughness dinosaur for 5 mana is a huge deal. It could really start digging deep. Apex Altasaur, of course, a great big 10/10 for 9. When it comes in, can fight a creature you control, and whenever it's dealt damage, it can fight again. Could be a really nice threat to your opponent's boards, and has some fun combo lines to give it an indestructible and let it fight every other creature out there. Bonehorde Dracosaur, of course, letting you exile those top 2 cards at the start of your turn, and giving you some value depending on what you get. Bronzebeak Foragers originally came in the precon and is a great dino for me just on its ability. It comes in and exiles up to 1 target non-land permanent each each opponent controls. Which truthfully is a huge deal because a lot of the times you can just get a bunch of value off of this, taking somebody's key thing. And then you could put it back in their graveyard to gain some life if you want to, but a lot of times they'll probably just sit under the Foragers as long as we can protect it. Dinosaurs out of Spaceship, just giving all your other dinos Vigilance and Trample is a big deal. A lot of them have Trample to begin with, but I think Vigilance is a particularly interesting ability because we're used to kind of, right, just trying to put enough power on the board to run over our opponents. Vigilant makes it nice so that you can at least block some of it, or Shaker Dreadmaw, giving you that draw for each other dino you control is really great and really helpful. Atali Primal Conqueror first coming in. Everybody exiles from the top till they hit an unland card, and we can cast any number of them for free. A great ability, and the backside of Atali does turn into a nice threat. We're playing pretty much all the Galtas we can. Galta and Mavrin, most of the time, is going to be used for the top ability to make a tapped in attacking XX Dino, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. But Galta Maverick is really truthfully just a 12 toughness creature for 7 mana, so you can really dig deep. Same thing with Galta Primal Hunger, right? Coming in cheaper for the total power among creatures you control. Galta is almost always going to come in for just 2 green mana and, discover you for 12. And then the newest Galta from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, of course, being able to come in and put any number of creatures from your hand onto the battlefield is a huge deal, especially, right, once we have a haste enabler on board to bring a bunch of dinos in. Of course, we're playing one of the classic commanders in Gishath, right? Whenever it hits a player, you reveal that many cards from the top of your library for the number of damage it's dealt, and you can put dinos from among them onto the battlefield. A really nice ability. I just think I prefer the idea of Discover over Gishath, and I think with Pants being 5 instead of 8, I think you get to really set up more value in the mid range end. Whereas Gishath to me feels a little bit more Voltron-y, and it's harder to protect it when it's 8 mana, and you're probably trying to spend all 8 of your mana that turn on it. Hulking Raptor, of course, adding mana every turn for you. Hunting Velociraptor, as long as we've dealt common damage to a player this turn with a creature of any of its creature types, and making them prowl for 2 and a red is a huge deal. There's so many dinos that if you're cheating out for just 2 and a red, you're getting so much value on. Kogel and Yadar can either fight when it comes in or have trample and haste, which is nice. Polani's Hatcher is one of our 2 haste enablers that are on Dinosaurs, giving all other dinosaurs haste. And then you get a couple egg tokens, and then beginning a combat on your turn, you can sack one of the eggs to get a little token. Pugnacious Hammerskull, a 6 toughness creature for 3 mana, so hopefully it can come down early and get a nice big Discover trigger. And then it does get a stun counter if it attacks while we don't control another dinosaur, but it's probably just not going to happen, right? Our deck's just packed full of them. Quartzwood Crasher says whenever one or more creatures we control hit a player with trample, we make a XX dinosaur beast creature token where X is the amount of damage those creatures dealt to that player. Note that this does trigger for every opponent you hit with one or more creatures with trample, so Quartzwood can really lead to us getting a couple more big dinos. Regal Behemoth was another attempt I made a little bit go at trying to help out some of our mana issues. Whenever you tap land for mana while you're the Monarch, you add an additional mana of any color. It does not say any color they could produce. It just says any color, which is a huge effect. It can really help you, right, even that out. The other haste enabler is Register Alpha, giving all of our other dinos haste. It comes in with a token. Sunfurl Imitator says whenever it attacks, you can never become a copy of another dino you control, except his name is Sunfurl Imitator. There's kind of 2 schools of thought for Sunfurl. You can either make a copy of Pantlaza, and then you effectively have 2 triggers of Pantlaza every turn, or you could go after one of your big dinos, right, and make Sunfurl into a threat. Of course, Aether Drift introduced a couple big dinos, and although Tarion has no abilities, I really like it. It's 5 mana for 7 toughness. And then when you start giving it trample and things like that, you have a nice big attacking creature for just a few mana. Vaultport Tyrant, of course, drawing you cards whenever creatures power 4 or greater come in and gaining a life. And then if the Tyrant were to die, you get a copy of it, right? Which I think is a huge deal, especially because then it comes back as a nice threat. Wrathful Raptors, if a dino we control be dealt damage, deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dino. And then Zakama's a ton of fun. If you could cast it, you untap all your lands, and it has some nice abilities. And a lot of times it's just going to probably lead to you just putting more dinos in, more big things in, as you start running into your opponents. There's a couple good ways to cheat them in. Of course, we have Galta Stampede Tyrant, right, that we talked about. We have 2 green spells. Both have the order in their name, which is kind of how you could share that they're similar in their abilities. But Natural Order requires us to sacrifice a green creature. We can go get any green creature card and put onto the battlefield. A lot of our dinos are green, so Natural Order does let us go get some interesting things. And a lot of times my favorite target here is something like Galta Stampede Tyrant to, put all your dinos from your hand onto the battlefield. But, I have used this to go get a Register Alpha or go get a Polani's Hatcher just to bring in haste. The other one, though, Savage Order, requires you to sacrifice a creature power 4 or greater, but you can go get any dinosaur you want. But the key thing is it comes in with Indestructible. So this is really nice for, again, Galta again, coming in and dumping your hand in. But this is a really fun combo with Apex Altasaur, because then it comes in with Indestructible, and unless your opponent can stop it, it's going to just try to fight everything on the board, right, being a nice little board clear for you. And then Smuggler's Surprise for 6 mana, we could put up to 2 creature cards from our hand on the battlefield, or this is kind of a nice heroic intervention for our big creatures if we need it to be. But like I said, we want these pieces that we could potentially discover into that can help us out. Urza's Incubator goes a long way, right? Reducing the cost of all of our dinos. The Fire Crystal for Final Fantasy gives out haste, reduces all our red spells by 1. A lot of our dinos are red, so that's really nice. And then For 6 mana, you could make a copy of a creature you control if you want to. Not all of our dinos are legendary, right? So this could be potentially useful, right? Depending on what you hit, and it's going to have haste, right? Because of the Fire Crystal. Chandra's Ignition is kind of interesting. I've yet to see it in a game, but I think it's going to be useful. Taking one of the Galtas, dealing a bunch of damage across the board and to each opponent. A big thing to note with Wrathful Raptors is that it works really well with a card like Blasphemous Act that deals damage to every creature. It will also work well with Chandra's Ignition because then all your dinos are getting dealt damage, and you can just start to ping that damage at your opponents for even more damage, right? Garruk's Uprising, right, giving all of our creatures trampled, drawing whenever creatures power 4 graders come in. Mirari's Wake, the flat buff, but really you care about doubling up the mana. Note that it can only add a mana of any type that land produced. So you don't get any mana like you do on the Behemoth, but it's still helpful. And then the card that I think you're going to see a lot talked of in a Pantlaza deck, and it's one of those key ones that the first couple times you read it, you may not understand it, but once you see it work, you're going to really care about it. That's cream of the crop. So 2-mana enchantment says whenever a creature comes into play, we get to look at the top X of our library where X is that creature's power, and then we put one of them on top and the rest on the bottom. Basically, what cream of the crop is going to try to do is, every time a creature comes in, you get to pretty much scry deep, right? But the important part is that if we're going to put this in conjunction with our pants trigger, we get to kind of pre-look at the top few and decide what we'd want ideally to put on top. Sometimes you're going to whiff, right? Sometimes you're not going to find something ideal. But when you're putting in big dinos that are 6/6s, 7/7, 8/8s, you're going to find something you want to put on top. And cream of the crop is just really useful for that, picking out that thing that you want and sticking it on top there. Rhythm Wild, of course, giving out Riot, which can give a creature haste. Monstrous Vortex potentially adding more Discover, but it's on cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, power 5 or greater, you discover. And this is nice because you're just getting more Discover over time. Remember, Pants is only once per turn when a creature enters. Monstrous is on every cast. And then Beans, right? Giving you the card draw just to help you refill your hand, get into more dinos, get into more support pieces. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. Although I've had a good experience in with Pants, and I'm still trying to find some fun. There's always things that can change, and there's been 2 cards that have pretty much always been in my maybe board for this deck that I just have yet to find the slots for, but I think probably belong in there. The first is Invasion of Ikoria, a battle that on the front side lets you come in and search your library or your graveyard for a non-human creature with mana value X or less and put it on the battlefield. Again, you get to set your value for X, so you're going to determine what creature do I want to go get and go get it. I think there's a lot of preference to something like this. You could go get Regisaur or Polani for 5, right? Because that's their mana value. There's a lot of different ways you could look at Invasion of Ikoria, but then when you attack it, flip into its backside, it just says that each non-human creature you control can assign damage as though it weren't blocked. And that's potentially a huge deal, especially if you already have Trample. You're just, you'd normally be losing a couple points on having to trample over. Well, Zolotha just says, nope, we're just going to nail in. This is also nice because if you flip it over, this would enter as a dinosaur, meaning that you could potentially trigger Pants as triggered that way. And then Finale Devastation. You search your library or graveyard for a creature card with mana value X or less and put on the battlefield. If its X is 10 or more, you give a bunch of haste and buffs. Again, same reason as the Ikoria. I like that you can go searching for a specific thing. The only reasons that they're not in there quite yet, if I'm 100% honest, is I think Natural Order and Savage Order are just a teeny bit less narrow. You got to remember that X spells you can't cast for free. You have to pick 0 when you cast them off of Discover, right? Whereas the orders you don't. I still think they belong in the deck, and truthfully, I think it's something that I'm looking probably to do over the next set of testing. Mainly because Finale Devastation is a really fun printing in Commander Masters with dinos on it, so I think that makes sense. Of course, we see Galta there as well. And then Invasion of Ikoria has probably the only version of Zolortha we'd play. The Ikoria Zolortha is really not what we're trying to do in our deck. But again, I love the idea of these 2 cards, and I'm excited to eventually get them in there once I can find the spot. Let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what are we looking at and how we're going to set up our games. So 3-lander here with a couple pieces of ramp, which is always good to see. We also see a Dino and Wrathful Raptors. But I think truthfully, we're looking to set up, we can go for the Nature's Lore here. Nature's Lore is great because remember, Nature's Lore can go get our dual type lands. So we're going to go get our Triumph. And then I don't really see anything else to do but the Sky Shroud claim here this turn. Sky Shroud does have a couple interesting targets. I think I'm just going to go for Cinderglade and Canopy Vista, but there are more targets you can go for. We are still going to be able to turn 4 Pantlaza. The nice thing is we just have some nice mana, right? So we can Beans to draw, but I think it makes more sense just to play Pants first. We're going to go ahead and discover for 4, because remember, Pants gets to discover off its own trigger. And there's Fire Crystal. That's great. We're going to play the Beans and draw. Now, if we played Beans first, right, we would have drawn that Fire Crystal and wouldn't have got it for free. Now Pantlaza can attack, and now any dinos that are coming in are going to be able to have haste and reducing the cost of the red ones. But I like this. This, worked out for us. So now this turn, Galta, unfortunately, isn't super cheap yet, right? It's only reduced down to 8 right now, but we could play the Wrathful Raptors to help us out, right? This would turn Galta to only 3 mana, so it'd be 5, right? And then 3. But this is going to trigger Beans, which is going to draw us a card. The Raptor comes in, we're going to not discover on that one, because remember, Galta is 3 mana. That's going to draw us off the Beans, and we're going to discover. The important thing to know is that you can't discover before you do the Beans trigger, because the Beans trigger is on cast. So we pretty much have to do the Beans and draw. And that's great. We see Registar Alpha. It's going to come in. It gives all of them haste, even though they had it already with the Fire Crystal. And that is a cast of a spell with mana of 5 or greater. So we're going to draw again. Now we got a nice attack this turn. You've got Galta that has Trample. The Registar Alpha actually makes a 3/3 when it comes in with Trample. So you do have another dinosaur that can also attack this turn. But the point here, right, is we've got a bunch of value in one turn, right? And now with multiple, right, haste enablers, we're just in great shape. This turn works out really well because we can cream first, right? And then Vulpar Tyrant. Now, we got to pay the full 7 for it, right? Obviously. But now on a cast, we're going to draw. Nothing we can do about that, right? Then it enters and we have 2 triggers. We have the Beans trigger, and then we have the cream trigger and then the Pantlaza trigger. We're going to do cream of the crop first. So we're going to look at the top 6, right? Where 6 is its power. And remember, we're going to discover for 6, right? So we need to kind of think about what we're going to get here. Well, really the only spell we can cast is Chandra's Ignition. I don't really love it. Remember, with Discover, you can put it into your hand. But I think I'll just put Command Tower on top, and I think we're just going to roll the dice on the Discover and see what we hit, see if we get anything better. Well, we hit Trumpeting Carnosaur, which is another dino, so it's going to come in. On cast, we're going to draw off Beans, right? Kind of unfortunate. We would have loved to see the Crasher. It comes in. It's going to have its own Discover trigger, but Cream is still going to go off. And remember, we're looking equal to power, so we're actually going to look at 7 cards here. And then remember, we're discovering for 5. So I think probably the easiest choice. Actually, I think it's the Garruk's Uprising for the Trample. Not everything here has Trample, right? We have a couple creatures that don't have Trample. But I also could see the point of something like Hammer Skull, right? Because it's another key attacker that could really benefit us. But I think we'll do the Garruk's Uprising. It comes in, draws us a card because its ability draws a card if we have power 4 greater. And now this is great. All these have haste. You have the Flawless Maneuver to protect the board now. We're going to take a really big attack. Sorry, that actually draws us another one off of Vulpar Tyrant's abilities. We're going to end up having to pitch down. And actually, sorry, it would draw us off its own, which probably affected that Discover. But oh well. I mean, we're in a great shape. You're attacking, and then you have this to hold up your board. I think we had no mana left. Otherwise you could try to like ephemerate one of them on your opponent's turn, just get another trigger. But otherwise, I think it's just Crasher next turn, and then you're going to make those Dinosaur Beasts, and we're really just going to hurt our opponents. Now, thankfully, that was all on turn 6, which just goes to show you why, the original title for the deck, Velociraptor, right, really shows you like what the deck's trying to do. This hand's a little more devoid of ramp, but I think it's still a good one. We have the Register, the Imperiosaur there to buff our creatures. Got a 5-lander, so all we need is a way to really speed ourselves up. Notably interesting triple Shockland in our hand, which is kind of interesting, right? But I think it's the Imperiosaur here. Now we have the choice of either the Migration Path just to get us higher ahead, or something like Garrick's Uprising, which would draw us a card. But also, the Imperiosaur is going to make Pantlaza better next turn. I think I like the Uprising. Again, the whole point there is just to get more value. Now I'd have Pants come in. Remember, it's 5 because of the Imperiosaur. So we're going to go digging. Flora Fortitude we'll just happily put into our hand. Note the Flare can sack Pants for free now. And then Pants will have a draw trigger off of Garrick's Uprising. Remember, we can do those at our choice. Because the enters abilities go off at the same time, we can choose when to do them. I'll pitch. I guess we're a couple mana off of some of our big ones. But we do have something like Smuggler's Surprise, and we do have something like Savage Order. We could, Savage Order the Imperiosaur away for Galta and just dump our hand in, right? So there are some definite options there. I think I'll pitch the path. So as we come to this turn, I almost feel like I have to Savage Order this away. Because if I go get Galta, I'm putting 1, 2, 3, 4 additional Dinosaurs plus whatever plus whatever I discover into, basically in with haste because of that Register Alpha. So on enter, Galta's going to have its ability and it's going to have its Discover ability. I'll just have the Discover ability go off first. We'll just see what we get into for 12. We see a Nature's Lore, so just getting an extra land in ain't no problem at all. And then Galta is going to dump in Behemoth, Yadaro, Temple Altasaur, and Register Alpha, which again makes that 3/3. Now they all have haste because everything but the Alpha has haste. Notably with Koga and Yadaro, now we could just have it fight something since it is coming in with that. We're also going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 draw triggers, and we would have had the Garrick's Uprising trigger. So let's kind of step back. Would we have drawn an extra dino for Galta's trigger? No, we wouldn't have. So now we're going to draw 3 more times because we had 3 more creatures that big that end. And now take our attacks, right? And now this turn, you could always go for something like Chandra's Ignition on the Galta, like after combat, right, to get that big damage out. Otherwise, with him having haste, I think you just want to pick. If you're going to do that, you just pick the biggest thing you can. I mean, I hope we're still the Monarch for the purposes of Rego Behemoth, right, to do that. But otherwise, I'm trying to think what I would do here. Could play the Tyrannosaur. The only thing with that is it takes me all my mana to do, so I couldn't do that Ignition. I guess there's a chance to draw into something more, but I kind of like just holding up the Flare, taking the attack, and then just like Chandra's Ignitioning this Galta for 12. I mean, it's going to deal a lot of damage. Remember that Temple Altar is going to protect everybody but itself. It says if a source you control would deal damage to another dinosaur you control, you prevent all but one of it. So basically, Altasaur is going to die, but none of our other dinos will, and you're just gonna probably run the board. Which arguably, I guess you could have done it before combat, right? Because then you would probably cleared the way of blockers. So I guess you can kind of see the dividing tree there. But again, a good example of getting dinos in and immediately getting into combat. You don't want to be wasting time. You really want to be hitting hard. Here's an interesting one. 2 planes, but we have a path and an Arcane Signet for the extra mana. There's Gwenna. Can tap for a mana in any 2 combination of colors. And then if you cast a creature spell with power 5 greater, get you untapped. We can have a couple interesting dinos in our hand. Gwenna was one of the adds that I added to this deck when I moved the deck away from being a Kahira companion deck of having all dinosaurs. I thought Gwenna made a ton of sense because it adds the mana. It can be really useful. Unfortunately, Pants won't trigger Gwenna. So unfortunately, it's not going to untap, but I still think it's worth Pants here on turn 4. And we see Cream of the Crop. Perfect. That's pretty much ideal. So now, right as we come into our next turn, we have 7 mana, right? But if we cast a creature power 5 or greater, we get to untap, right? So you never quite know what we're going to get into. So your options here are either Kogla, Vaultborn, or Quartzwood. I think I like the Vaultborn as my option here. So remember, on cast, we're going to untap Gwenna. And then Vaultborn comes in. We'll do the Cream of the Crop first, right? Looking at us for 6. If I had a way to enable haste, sorry, we'd also have the Vaultborn draw, which I guess we'll do in a second. If I had any way to enable haste, like this would be a really interesting just natural order play. Just get rid of Gwenna, go get the new Galta that dumps in creatures and dump in our entire hand. The problem is we have no way to give them haste, otherwise this would be, top tier, right? I guess there's the argument that we also have the Galta off, that we don't need the natural order because we're looking at Galta there, but remember that we're going to be discovering for 6, all right? We can't hit Galta off of this discover. My thought is probably something like Dracosaur, just because it can get us some extra resources. But I'm trying to think of what. I'm trying to think of what's my recourse here, right? Flawless as a way to protect the board. I guess I could technically, natural order for the Galta, dump my hand in, and then just attack next turn. We'd have the flawless to keep us probably safe for one turn. I guess that's a route we could go. I'm just trying to think of. My only thought there is Galta coming in is going to get you a draw trigger. You get a draw trigger off the Vaultborn, so you potentially have a chance to seed a couple extra dinos into our hand. Let's take that line and see where it goes. So we're going to put these all back in, and we're going to end up shuffling, so it's not that big of a deal. Sack the Gwenna. Get Galta. We'll have the original Vaultborn Tyrant draw trigger. Galta's going to go off if it's cream of the crop, and then we have a draw trigger. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't just do its cream trigger first, because then we could basically pick something from among these 12 cards. Ideally, it's something like Regisaur Alpha or Polani's Hatcher. Unfortunately, we didn't hit either of them, but that's okay. Note we're discovering for 12, so we could get the Great Henge. We could get a Chroma's Will. The only downside of Chroma's Will is it doesn't give out haste. But I mean, same thing we talked about this turn. I think if we put a Chroma's Will back on top, Druid off of Vaultborn Tyrant, and then dump all these dinos in, not only do you have a couple cream of the crop triggers, right, which we can resolve in any order you want or what have you, but we're drawing 4 times just because I'm not going to play test it out. We'll just draw 4, but now basically our whole board knows we have a Chroma's Will. Well, we don't have to show them, do we? No, we don't. We don't have to show them. So they don't know we have a Chroma's Will. But again, a Chroma's Will is lethal next turn with all these huge dinosaurs. We have the Flawless to hold us up at least once, and then, we just have a board full of dinos. Althasar can start fighting if we wanted to, and I think we're just in a good spot. I mean, it's kind of what Pants is so good at, is cheating those dinos in, and really taking advantage of the board. Last playtest here, a 3-lander with Rampant Growth and Migration Path. A lot of ramp in front of us. We see Althasar and Bonehorde Dracosaur there on the top end. Otherwise, I think we're just kicking our way up. We're going to go get that mountain, right, just to make sure we have all 3 of our colors and we're safe. I was originally going to go for the Sky Shroud claim, but I think it's Gwenna here. Arcane Signet into the Gwenna. And then Gwenna can get me Pants here, which is my thought. Discover for 5 for Hunting Velociraptor. Pretty cool. Going to be useful on a future turn. Now just 5 mana, so unfortunately we priced ourselves a little bit, right, outside of some of our big dinos. But sorry, it's 7 with Gwenna, so 7 mana. That does price us out of Altasaur, but it can get us Dracosaur down. And Gwenna, remember, would untap because of the Dracosaur. And we could still put in something like Sunfur Limitator or Kinjali Sunwing this turn, which could be interesting. So we go Dracosaur, which untaps Gwenna. I'm going to discover here because obviously Sunwing isn't bigger than it. Oh, Terrian's pretty great. Another big dino. And then I would probably just tap it for the Sunwing. So now our opponent's things are coming in tapped. Again, a couple of these can attack this turn, but that's okay. We're really setting up our board really nicely. We've got a couple big dinos, right, to hurt our opponents. Prowl's really nice, right, if you want to do the Discover second main instead of first. But otherwise, start of our turn, we're going to exile the top 2. If we exile a non-land, we get a treasure. If we exile a land, we get that dino. So we're going to get both here. Play the cliff top 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 because of Gwenna, 9 with the treasure. So that is enough to just hard cast the Altasaur. Could help us, get out of the way. And it'd be a nice discover, right? Discovering for 10. You never know exactly what you're going to get. I think I would do that, right? That untaps Gweno, which does potentially give us an option to still get something else down depending on what we hit. We're going to discover for 10. We see Flare of Fortitude. I think I'm willing to put that in my hand. We have a couple white creatures that we can give away to protect it. And again, Altisaur can do the fighting if we want to. Again, we're still getting in for damage. We didn't see any of the, trample enablers or buffs or anything like that, but I still think we're in good shape with a bunch of these big dinos, right? Especially something like Tarian. It's still going to be a good attacker, even though it doesn't have trample. And then hopefully we can just keep digging into more support pieces, right, to make the board even better. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Pants on the comment section below. Truthfully, I don't think I played this deck enough. I really need to bring this off the bench more. It's a deck I really enjoy, and it hasn't got as many of the recent updates as some of the other decks have, which I think is fine. But I think it's probably time to come back and take it off the bench a little bit more and play it a little bit more to see what other changes I need to make. And genuinely, I love this deck. It's a ton of fun. I love Dinosaurs. Gishath was one of the first decks I ever built. And so, I love still having this in my deck box. But let me know what you think, and I will catch you on the next one.